You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game. And we will be doing lots of politics and public policy this afternoon. We're taping it. We're taping it in the afternoon on November 23rd. But you'll be seeing it in the evening, and you'll be seeing John Tillman. He is chairman and CEO. Chairman and CEO of the Illinois?
CEO. I gave up the title chairman many years ago.
We won't even go into that. He is CEO of the Illinois Policy Institute. He deals in policy. And the most important thing we're going to be talking about here is the election of Bruce Rauner. And we're just going to start right there, John, with, these people have a lot of things they can do with their time. They can go to another channel. They can go to a movie. Why does it matter to their lives, all the viewers here in Illinois, as to why Bruce Rauner is governor as opposed to Pat Quinn?
Well, I think we've seen the track record of Pat Quinn over the last 6 years. Illinois has gone from being a modestly competitive state to dead last in almost every measure, 50th in GDP growth, dead last in job growth, really horrific job growth for African Americans, in particular African American males, really tough educational outcomes. Just by every measure, Illinois continues to go downhill under Pat Quinn. So now what we have is a new chapter in Illinois' history opening up, and we're going to see whether Bruce Rauner is able to wrangle the people in Springfield and get some solutions.
Well, the thing of it is, and John, you might notice I'm almost shouting because we're taping this here, folks. We're taping this here in a restaurant, and we sometimes pick out some of that noise outside. So I'm going to ask you to shout at me, okay? Shout it out.
I've long wanted to shout at you, Jeff, and I am going to do that now. I'm going to shout at you like you've never been shouted at before.
All right, that's great audio. I can feel it in my bones. But, okay, so how much of this can you really attribute? You talked about the job growth being slow, unemployment being high, particularly among minorities. Some people say in some black and Hispanic neighborhoods, unemployment is like 30%, 50%. Mm-hmm. But can you really blame that on Pat Quinn and the rest of the Democratic Party? They've been in charge?
Well, look, Jeff, this is so easy to have accountability on what's going on in this state. You have a Midwest state, an industrial, diverse economy, Midwest state. You have agriculture, you have manufacturing, you have services, you have the financial sector, you have all of that here. We have all the advantages. The best location in the Midwest. And we're surrounded by Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Iowa, Kentucky to our south, which is a mid-south state, and of course Missouri. We lose population to every one of those contiguous states. We're losing economically to every one of those states. And what's the difference? The difference is in 2010, those other states, for the most part, particularly Michigan, Indiana, and Wisconsin, took a different path in policy than we took. We took tax and spend. They took budget discipline, fiscal discipline, and a pro-growth, pro-business approach.
Okay, so advise Mr. Rauner, because as I said, we're taping it on November 23rd. He comes in about the middle of January. Right now, he's governor-elect. He becomes the governor around the middle of January. As you know, in early January 1, by law, unless the legislature does something, the state income tax, which is currently at 5%, will go to 3.75%, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. So the Democrats passed a tax hike in January of 2011 on a partisan line vote, and they planned for a sunset to go to 3.75% at the end of this year. And so what's happening now is everybody is suddenly saying, oh my gosh, what the heck is going on? We suddenly have this fiscal nightmare coming up, and it isn't a fiscal nightmare. It is a planned sunsetting of the tax hike. It's the Democrats that have created this budget cliff by not having responded the way they should have during the last several budget cycles. So Governor-elect Rauner is going to have to solve the Democratic problem that was created for him.
Well, okay. So he comes in. He's governor. The Democrats have made it clear they're not going to on their own raise the tax. They wanted to see this governor do it. In other words, they want him to wear the jacket because the tax will go down to 3.75. They're saying for fiscal 2015, and I think you would agree, there's a shortfall of $2 to $4 billion.
It depends how you measure it, but roughly speaking, in the next fiscal year, which starts July 1st, there's somewhere around a $3 billion revenue decline. But keep in mind something that no one's talking about is that revenue decline will still leave revenues at one of the highest rates Illinois has ever had. We had record revenues before this tax hike. We had obviously record revenues during the tax hike, and when it partially sunsets as of December 31st, 2014, we're still going to have near record revenues. The problem isn't a lack of revenues, which is what one side of the aisle wants you to think. The problem is a lack of spending discipline and a lack of proper allocation of resources to core services. And it's a fight for the future earnings of the taxpayers of Illinois between those who consume government services, getting benefits from the government, and the government employees.
Okay, but let's try to get specific, because there are doubters out there, and they may say, you know, John Tillman lives in this ivory tower. I bet people, you're probably surprised that people might say that about you, because we're not going to go through John's whole career, but it was plenty practical. He doesn't really come from the ivory tower.
No, I've spent most of my life in business.
Business.
I've balanced budgets.
Okay.
I've had to make tough payroll decisions. I've had to lay people off. I've hired people. I've allocated capital. I know how difficult this is, and there's no minimizing how difficult this is. But those people are wanting to go along the status quo that has put Illinois in the hole we're in. We're in this hole because of a lack of imagination on how to solve the problems. The problems cannot be solved by taxing Illinois taxpayers at an ever higher rate. And that is what the people who are advocates of higher revenues want you to think. The only way to solve the problem is through higher taxes. They are wrong.
Okay, but people would say, and let's not quibble on numbers here, fiscal 2015, we're already through half of it. They say Pat Quinn cheated. He had spent a lot more in the first half than he could actually do based on the budget. So we actually may have, as if he had spent it evenly, we'd have a budget shortfall for the last 2 months, people say.
The bottom line on this is that
Can I get the question?
No, I'm going to. You said I should shout at you, so I'm shouting at you.
But let me ask you a question.
I know
John.
what the question is. So do your listeners.
What's the question?
The question is that Pat Quinn front-loaded the spending to create a bigger cliff at the end of the year, and that is now in Bruce Rauner's lap.
And
that is your question.
How much is the cliff in your view?
Somewhere between $600 and $700 million would be my guess. But the point of the question, but the most important thing for your viewers to know is that Speaker Madigan, John Cullerton, the Senate President, and Pat Quinn created this cliff. And suddenly they want Bruce Rauner to come in and swoop and fix it by raising taxes? That's insane.
But my understanding, and John, you may be right and I be wrong, is that the cliff for fiscal 2015 is closer to $2 billion, not $700 million. Go with me just for a second. If it is $2 billion for fiscal 2015, and we'll get to 2016 in a second, but for 2015, assume it is $2 billion. Assume what you said is right. They being the Democrats, in your view, created the mess. They want Bruce Rauner, the Republican, to solve it. That may be unfair, but he has to solve it.
No question.
What would you advise Bruce Rauner to do to deal with what some call a $2 billion shortfall? Should he handle it all by cutting spending and leaving the tax rate at 3.75%, or should he adjust taxes up and cut some spending? Trace out the numbers. Give me the estimates for you as to how he should deal with the $2 billion shortfall.
Well, I don't accept the premise. I don't accept the premise of $2 billion. That's the number that the alarmists want you to believe. It doesn't really matter what the premise is. It's somewhere between $500 million. Some people are obviously saying $2 billion is that you would like to quote. That's not the way to go about this. The way to go about this is to look at how much money we're going to have coming in from January 1st to the end of the fiscal year on June 30th, and then take that amount of money and go to all the people who are advocating for spending and let them divide it up. Let Speaker Madigan divide it up. Let Senate President Cullerton divide it up. Let all the advocates, let the union heads have a seat at the table. Let the taxpayers have a seat at the table. Let's take the money that we expect to come in and talk about how we're going to allocate that. And let's decide who's at the front of the line. Are the poor and disadvantaged at the front of the line, which is what I think should happen? Or are the unions and their multimillionaire pensions at the front of the line? Are we going to perpetuate a government-run retirement for unions that's unfair to union rank-and-file members and perpetuate the myth that's going on? Let's let them figure it out.
I don't want to labor this too much because
Yes, you do.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do.
I do want to get an answer, John, and I'm not sure.
I just gave you one.
Well, let me try out my question and see if you think you have, and if so, then we'll move on, because I will respect if you think I'm being redundant. Mm-hmm. So I'm thinking that the Senate President, John Cullerton, and Speaker Madigan have said, traditionally the governor gives a budget speech, and he gives that speech, I think, in the middle of February, State of the Budget or something like that. And they have said, we're not going to do anything until the governor tells us what his budget is. So if they say that, then isn't it incumbent on Bruce Rauner to come up with a budget that somehow matches, has that shortfall taken care of? So if the shortfall, if he doesn't do anything, and in his view, he may disagree with you, if in his view he doesn't do anything, he has $2 billion less over the next 6 months in revenue than in spending. Now, what should Bruce Rauner do and I may have misspoke, because the budget he's going to propose is for 2016, which we'll get to in a second.
Right.
So forget that speech. Never mind.
Let me clarify for your viewers. Let me clarify for viewers, Jeff. There are two things.
Who's hosting the show?
Well, right now I am. There are two
There's been a
things.
coup d'etat.
It's always so fun, though, isn't it? There are two things that Governor-elect Rauner is going to deal with. One is the second half of the current fiscal year and the anticipated shortfall that you are
Let's
now
deal with that
referring to.
first. Let's
No,
deal
but I
with
want
that
people.
first.
Let me lay it out for people so
Okay.
they understand. Then the second thing he's
Okay.
going to deal with in his budget address in February is the new fiscal year's budget that starts July 1st and runs through June 30th of 2016. Two
Okay.
separate subjects.
Okay.
So, having said that, the way that Governor Quinn and the arsonist, Speaker Madigan and Senate President Cullerton, because they're the ones who started the fire, right? They're the ones who put the House of Illinois on fire. And now what they're saying to Governor-elect Rauner is, we want you to put it out immediately in the first 6 months you're in office. This is a ridiculous premise. It took them almost a decade to destroy the fiscal health of this state. It's going to take several years for Governor-elect Rauner, with some good Democratic cooperation, to fix it. So the first thing he should do is acknowledge the fact that it's going to be very difficult to instantly fix this. We've been running deficits despite our balanced budget
Moving
requirement
this right
for
along,
years.
since we only have about 15 minutes left, assume he's done that. He's done what
Okay.
you just said. He's told people it's going to be very hard to fix this instantly, and yet people say to him, his advisors, you've got 6 months to deal with this $2 billion shortfall unless you want to carry over some of the deficit to next year.
This is, okay, so.
I think that's what they're going to say. to him.
Actually, we're not even discussing the most important thing for Governor Rauner to address. We're discussing symbolism and the substance, let me finish, the symbolism and substance of the budget, which is very important. But his number one issue, in my view,
Yes.
is to stop the hemorrhaging of people leaving the state, to change the course
Let's
of
go
the
there.
way people
Let's go there.
believe
Let's
that the future of Illinois is brighter here tomorrow than it is today.
We'll come back to my question. Let's go to your
But
point.
this is he has to give people hope that
Okay.
they stick around, they stay here, they pay taxes, that things will get better. So the most important thing he needs to do is send a signal to the entrepreneurs and the workers and the families of Illinois that if you stay here, your future will be brighter here than in Indiana or Texas or Florida.
How does he do
And so
that?
he cannot do that by raising taxes.
How does he do that?
He does that by starting to remove the roadblocks and potholes that slow down economic growth, workers' comp reform, the entire regulatory scheme that makes it take months and months and months to start a business here, where it takes 30 to 60 days to start a business 60 miles to our east in Indiana. There's a host of things he can do in the regulatory side of things, a host of things he can do with fees and the way business licensing is done. There's a host of things he can do by working with Mayor Emanuel in Chicago to make it easier for people to start business. There's story after story. Go to our website, illinoispolicy.org, and you'll hear story after story of entrepreneurs who want to start businesses who are hamstrung by the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois. He should start there while he negotiates to figure out how to get through the current 6-month budget
So he
crisis.
started there, but he's still trying to. Let me come back. We let you go to your question. We let you answer it. Now let's go back to my question. How does he deal with this $2 billion? You said turn it over to them, and they say, Cullerton and Madigan and the Democrats say, you make the proposal, we'll decide if we agree. Now, if they say that, you can't just, I don't think you're saying he should shut down and not make a proposal.
I think what he should-
So what should he propose?
The legislature provides a budget to the governor to sign. The governor provides a framework of that budget. He should lay out a.
They do provide a, because I thought the budget address
He'll
was
present.
the governor
He'll
would
present.
present a budget.
He'll present a
Okay.
budget framework.
Okay, and what-
and that budget framework should say, in my opinion, that he should spend within the anticipated revenues, and he should set his budgetary priorities: education, health care, services for the poor and disadvantaged, core services for the poor and disadvantaged. And he should go to the appropriators that Speaker Madigan and Senate President Cullerton control on the various committees and say, I want you to appropriate and budget and appropriate within this framework, and make them make these tough calls. They started the fire, make them put it out.
And if they say no, we want to have specifics from you, what does
Well,
he
then
do
they'll
then?
negotiate and eventually have a budget that's passed, and it'll be either in or out of balance, and then he'll use his mandatory veto power to try to correct
Would
it.
you advise him to cut education spending, K through 12?
He's run on the idea of spending more money on education, so it wouldn't matter whether I advised him to do that or not.
But do you think he's wrong, that we shouldn't try to spend more on K through 12, we should try to spend less?
The problem, the problem, particularly in urban Illinois, in Chicago, Rockford, East St. Louis, Decatur, parts of Springfield, is not a lack of spending. The problem is a lack of a school system that is responsive to the people who are suffering most in this state. That's the problem, and he should focus on that. And he also ran on that. He also ran on a broader school choice, an expansion of charter schools. He ran on having people be able to choose independent schools if that's what was best for their children, and he should focus on that in combination with whatever he wants to do on spending.
So we have about 50,000 students, I believe, in Chicago public schools in charter schools.
Right.
Would you advise Governor-elect Rauner to try to up that to maybe 100 or 150,000 over 2 years?
I think he should do all he can with the bully pulpit of the governor's office to help expand charter schools and all school choice, not just charter schools.
School vouchers as well?
Education tax credits, educational savings accounts, vouchers, opportunity scholarships, all the choices should be available to every child. Every child in the city of Chicago and around this state should have an option to choose a school option that is best for them, not the monopoly option provided by the Chicago public school system.
You know Bruce Rauner, right?
Yes.
You've spoken with him.
Yes.
You've supported him.
Yes. As an individual, I have supported him, yes. Not institutionally. We're not allowed to get into elections.
But you have supported him. He probably trusts your advice. Do you think you'll have some opportunity in the next month or so to say some of what you're saying to me in more detail to him about school choice?
Governor-elect Rauner is going to have a lot of advice from many people. My voice will be one of many.
You don't think you'll have a disproportionate impact on the issue of school choice?
I would never comment on something like that if I thought it was true.
Okay, so that's what you say he should do about education. I think we've heard that. What should he do about pensions? Because as we speak, as you know, a lower court has held the reform bill, which you didn't think much of, the pension reform bill for state employees, unconstitutional. And some would say, notwithstanding your criticism, that it would have saved some money. Now those savings are gone. Now the expenses over this year and next year, if nothing else happens, are even higher than they would be without that reform bill. What's your advice to Governor-elect Rauner on the issue of pensions for the immediate 6 months and then the next 12 months after? Because those are rather large payments.
I think
and does he have some choice not to make them?
Certainly he has. The state of Illinois is legendary for not making pension payments. 43% of the pension, unfunded pension liabilities because of missed pension payments. The rest of it, though, is because the defined benefit system is so flawed to begin with. That's why 85% of the private sector has gone to defined contribution, where the employee is in control of their own retirement, which is what we advocate. So, to answer your question, I think he should do several things. One is he should use his voice, his bully pulpit, to educate workers and taxpayers on what is at stake. And what is at stake is who's in control of their retirement. The government that has failed, the politicians in Springfield, or the workers. I think it'd be better for the workers, the state government workers and local workers, to control their own retirement. Number two, this is a fight over the future earnings of private sector taxpayers. All the money that goes into pensions first comes out of the wallet of a private sector taxpayer. It's where all government money comes from. So this is a fight between government workers who receive their paychecks and pay taxes on it from private sector workers and how much a private sector worker gets to keep. And so if you take too much from that person that is providing it, they will continue to leave the state. And then in the end, government workers, the system will go bankrupt. So he's got to educate people on that and let them know we're in this together. We have to find a fair accommodation that protects what's been earned, protects current retirees, but protects the future earnings of taxpayers in a fair and just way.
And if you do what you want to do, which is go toward, and maybe not just toward, but to a defined contribution system, as you know, you can't, the prior employees who are collecting retirement from the state of Illinois, well, they can't go to a defined contribution. They're locked in. And some of the current employees have worked for 15 years. They're locked in. You might agree to a defined benefit system. You can change them over for the next 15 years to defined contribution.
Yeah, our position has always been that those who are retired should be protected in terms of their pensions, and those who are nearing retirement should be protected. But those workers who are younger and what they've earned in is vested, as if they quit their job and what they would take with them, they should get that. But from this day forward, they should be switched over to what we call worker freedom, where they're in a defined contribution where they control their retirement from that point forward. It's somewhat similar in terms of the end game, how much money they'll receive, and we've done a lot of work on this, which people can see at our website. But the bottom line is we think it is unfair to government workers to leave their retirement security in the hands of Springfield politicians who've put us into near bankruptcy.
And does that, if they do what you say, which is too big as if, you would have to persuade Governor-elect Rauner and other legislators to do what you say, okay? But if they do that, then do they, for the next 6 months and the 12 months after, do they substantially cut the pension costs? That is the amount of money Illinois has to put into that pension system.
Yes, we are the only ones who've had an actuarially scored pension proposal, and it cuts that pension payment by $2 billion.
Immediately.
Immediately.
And there are people who say that a defined contribution system, as you want to go to, involves an enormous initial transition cost.
That's a myth. That is one of the great myths that the unions.
It's
just absolutely not. It's just absolutely not
true. Would
true.
you cite anything people could go to in writing?
They can go to our website, illinoispolicy.org, or workerfreedom.com, and they can find all the information that lays this out.
Would it have authorities that support you, so it wouldn't be just John Tillman saying this?
Well, the actuarial scoring was done by the state of Illinois, KOSSOF. They did it.
And they agree with what you're saying. The
You'd have to-
transition
you
costs
should-
are not that substantial.
They would never make a policy statement like that because that's not what they do.
No, they agree that
No, there's an important distinction.
Okay.
KOSSOF would not make a policy assertion like what you just did. All they do is score numbers, just like the Congressional Budget Office. They scored our plan. It saves money. That's the bottom line. And there is no transition cost. That's a myth.
You know, I think Bruce Rauner, if he's watching this, he's breathing a sigh of relief because the problems sound so much less severe than he has been led to believe.
No, this is what's so funny.
I mean, isn't it true?
No, the problems are actually fairly simple to solve because it's a math problem, Jeff. The reason it's hard is because the math has to go through a political process, and Speaker Madigan and Senate President Cullerton and Democrat control of the General Assembly. That's what makes it hard. The policy solutions are self-evident. You must spend less than you take in. You must honor your obligations to current retirees and transition to something that's affordable. These solutions have been long known by many. The reason that they're not given currency is because of the political difficulty. And we'll see now with a new governor whether they get more currency.
There's one other reason, John. What other reason, in addition to the political difficulty, do you think would explain why you're not hearing so much about the solutions you're recommending?
Well, I think that the Republican caucus has been fairly cautious in what it's proposed as alternatives. There were 4 people who were very brave and advocating for the solution that we put out there. Representative Morrison, Ives, Dwight Kay, and of course David McSweeney were all very much leaders on this. I think
Did you mention Jeannie Ives?
I did. I just said Representative Ives.
Sorry.
I thought if I didn't, I said Representative Ives, Morrison, McSweeney, and Kay.
You speak your mind goes so fast, John. Some of
It's
our viewers,
ridiculous.
and even the host can't keep up with you. He doesn't even hear what you say.
You get me all excited, and I speak fast. I've been trained to speak slower, but it's very difficult for me. Anyway, they have done a great job of leading on this proposal, and I think we'll see greater support in the Republican caucus because the caucus is quite different coming into January of 2015.
But in addition, is there some other factor that maybe explains why people aren't hearing so much about some of these
Well, there are
ideas?
many reasons you could bring this up.
That's the key one, John.
Okay, well,
I'm going to have to tell you if you don't.
I'm going to tell you another one, I think, and then you can inform all of us with your wisdom.
Okay.
Another reason that you don't hear this is because many of the people who report on this information are unionized workforces themselves who are sympathetic to the government workers and the difficulties they are in at the hands of Springfield politicians. So reporters in newsrooms all over the state, producers and editors are part of union shops who also have some difficulties going on, and I think that's part of what drives how the reporting is done.
And so more generally, would you say it's kind of a narrow band that the mainstream media have? So when they look at solutions, they say pensions, well, you can raise the retirement age, you can increase the employee contribution, you can reduce the COLA. You never hear him say you could do what John Tillman says.
Well, I think you and I talked a little bit about this beforehand, and I think I alluded to this in passing at the beginning of the show, is that the problem in Illinois is that we only look to the tried and true received wisdom we have from Illinois. We should be looking around to other states like Michigan, Indiana, and Wisconsin, and some of the states that have actually solved their problems. Take the politics out of it and some of the acrimony of those political fights, and just let's look at whether their people are better off. Democrat, Republican, Independent alike. Union household, non-union household. Let's look at whether they're better off. Are people starting to migrate back into those states, or are they leaving the states like they are here? There are solutions all over the country that work. That's what we're proposing. And Illinois has an unbelievably provincial point of view where they are, I'm talking about the punditry class, the elites, are very close-minded about new ideas.
So you led the show by talking about you have to get people to stay here as opposed to continuing the out-migration.
Right.
How many people have left? You've got some statistics on that,
One
right?
person leaves this state about every 11 minutes, I believe it is.
So what is that over the course of a year?
I don't remember over the course of a year.
Okay.
I'm not going to do
Yeah.
that math for you right
Okay.
now. But the bottom line is we lose population to every one of our neighboring states, and we lose population to 43 of the other 49 states. We rank 48th at the rate at which people abandon our state to go to other states. So it's not a weather problem. It's a perceived opportunity problem. That's the number one thing that Governor-elect Rauner has to address. Make this the place where you pursue your dreams and achieve those dreams.
I think Jack Kemp, long ago now deceased, used to talk about hope, growth, and opportunity.
Right.
So that's what Rauner has to do. He has to give people in Illinois hope, growth, and opportunity so they stay here.
That's exactly right. Why do people pack up their families? It's very disruptive to move. Why would they move to Kentucky or Missouri in greater numbers than people from there are coming here? Why would they move to places like Texas? Everybody always talks about Texas and the weather. I just came back from Texas. You know, in the summertime, it's over 100 degrees. It's not pleasant in June, July, and August.
But Rauner's basically in agreement with you because he has said he favors a defined contribution system. He didn't think this pension law was constitutional. You didn't think it was a good idea, so it might come down to the same thing. So you're in agreement on pension reform. I think you and the governor-elect.
Well, we're certainly in agreement that the pension system needs to be reformed. I would never presume to speak
but
for what he's going to propose.
But he has spoken. I've heard him say he wants to go to a defined contribution system.
Yes, he is on record.
You want to go to a defined contribution.
He is on record as saying that,
You're in agreement there. He's spoken about the benefits of school choice, school vouchers, charter schools, competition.
Absolutely.
You are in agreement there.
Yes.
The one other thing, the main drivers of the budget, pensions, education, right?
Right.
And then Medicaid.
Medicaid.
Are you and Governor-elect Rauner in agreement on what to do about Medicaid?
I wouldn't want to speak for him. I'm not sure what is that has not been a core deliverable of his campaign, so I'm not sure where he's going to come down on that. But here's what
would you do?
Well, here's what his viewers should be aware is there's a coming explosion. Medicaid has been slowly exploding for many years. We now have 3 million people on Medicaid in the state of Illinois, and just in 1990 we only had 1.5 million people. Medicaid growth is about 104%, while our population grew at about 3.1%. So you already had the slow rolling explosion of Medicaid, which is driving a hole in the budget. In addition to that, with the rollout of Obamacare, where a huge chunk of new people are going on to Medicaid, Medicaid is about to blow up because the federal subsidy of that Medicaid expansion is going to end in 2 years, and then the people of Illinois are going to have to pay for that. The solution is to ask for a waiver from that. While the federal government works on the Obamacare reforms in the coming years, you have to ask for a waiver from that in order to concentrate resources on the poorest among us and try to have those who can afford to buy insurance on the exchanges or in the private sector do so.
And that's what the Illinois Policy Institute does. You've described it as a liberty, free market-oriented think tank.
We think the free enterprise system and the founding principles of this country are the greatest force for good ever created in the human sphere, and in particular, the greatest way to help the poor and disadvantaged rise.
And you've grown that from maybe 2 employees to, what, 35 now?
45-ish.
45-ish, from about $200,000 in budget to about $4 million?
$5 to $6 million.
And you are now a significant force in the legislative
My role in
process.
this is irrelevant.
The Illinois Policy Institute
the Illinois Policy
is a
Institute
significant force in the legislative process.
And the unbelievable
Right?
experts we have.
Yes.
People like Michael Lucci, Ted Dabrowski, Naomi Lopez-Bauman, Paul Kersey. These are experts in these fields who are doing great work to present that new point of view that needs to be heard in Illinois that has long been dormant.
And so just to wrap up, we kind of started this and we said...
And our pension expert, by the way, Ben Van Meter, is the one who is providing that solution that would actually solve the problems, both to benefit taxpayers and to benefit government workers.
Okay. I don't know if you've said, so clarify this. Have you said for the next 18 months he should keep the state income tax rate at 3.75%? Or have you said he might need to adjust it for the next 18 months?
I have said that the rate the promise was made to have it sunset to 3.75. It should go to 3.75.
He has proposed an expansion of the sales tax to cover services like accounting firms, law firms, tanning companies. Should he do that? Should he expand the sales tax to include all services? Or at least the great majority?
Sales taxes should only be put on the table, an expansion of sales taxes on services should only be put on the table to replace income taxes. It is much better to tax services than to tax labor, and income taxes tax labor. We would advocate a zeroing out of our income tax and replacing it with a sales tax. We would not advocate having both an income tax and an expansion of the sales tax, which we think would be a mistake.
The main thing I want to do is thank John Tillman. Thank you so much, John, for coming.
Great to be with you,
really
Jeff.
appreciate the time.
You bet.
And we want to get you back here soon.
Maybe one day.
All right. Thanks so much, John.
Thank you.